to Gaza now, where the health officials there say Israeli strikes have killed 4 Palestinians. Israeli shelling has been reported near the southern city of Khan Yunis as the two sides disagreed on how to extend a ceasefire. Israel says it's cutting off humanitarian aid entering Gaza because the first phase of the temporary ceasefire has expired. Israel has warned of consequences if Hamas refuses to accept a US proposal to continue the first phase of the truce during the Islamic month of Ramadan. The proposal calls for Hamas to release half of the remaining hostages and extend the truce through the Jewish Passover holiday on April 20th. Well, a little earlier I spoke to Mairav Zonszein, senior Israel analyst at the International Crisis Group, and I asked her how she would describe the state of the ceasefire deal now that Israel is shutting off humanitarian aid into Gaza.
Israel is the military power here. Nobody has any, everyone understands that Israel's the one who can apply the force, and it has applied extreme force for 15 months, and it still hasn't achieved its war goals. When Israel wants to fire in Gaza, it fires. When it wants to fire in Lebanon or Syria, for that matter, it does that. It has a ceasefire with Lebanon too, but it's creating the terms. Now, in certain cases, Israel definitely will rationalize that this is it's in its own security interests, but ultimately, this is overreach. This is not actual respect for the ceasefire. And so, again, the question is, regardless of the moral or international legal implications, what is Israel going to achieve?
We're going to have to leave it there. But as always, thanks for your analysis. Mairav Zonszein, senior analyst with the Israel-Palestine International Crisis Group. OK, let's bring in Shaina Lowe from the Norwegian Refugee Council for more on this. First and foremost, thanks for joining us on DW News. Could you tell us how great the need is for humanitarian aid for the people in Gaza?
The people in Gaza are continuing to suffer. Of course, the 6 weeks we saw an increase in aid supplies entering Gaza, but it's nowhere near enough to meet the tremendous needs that resulted from 15 plus months of active hostilities. Infrastructure is destroyed, housing is destroyed, and hospitals are barely functioning at this point. We need to see a surge of aid, and we need the crossings to be opened.
OK, well, what consequences would cutting off aid now have for the millions of people in Gaza?
Well, we're going to see a continuation of the starvation crisis that we've seen. We're going to see the collapse of medical facilities that are still treating the sick and wounded. We've already seen just in the last couple of weeks 6 newborns that died from exposure and the cold elements. We need to get in more shelter supplies as winter continues in Gaza. And really, we're going to see a return to the conditions that we saw just weeks ago, where people are really struggling to find anything for their basic needs: food, shelter, clean water, medicine.
Is there a plan in place to deal with this situation?
Well, of course, we all are contingency planning and working, but at this point, we saw the way that the conditions were prior to January 19th, when the ceasefire came into effect. The trickle of aid that was entering was nowhere near enough to meet basic needs. People in Gaza are still in emergency crisis mode, and without aid there, it's going to be incredibly difficult to try and serve people.
All right, well, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you, Shaina Lowe from the Norwegian Refugee Council.
Thank you.
Well, for more on this breaking story, let's cross straight to journalist Balig Sladeen in Tel Aviv. Balig, why this announcement now?
Well, we are in the first day after the end of the first phase of this deal, and Hamas did not agree to extend the first phase of the deal. And the parties did not agree to reach the second phase of the deal because of the gaps between the two parties. Hamas wants to keep its arms, wants to still or stay in the governing of the Gaza Strip in some way or another. And Israel wants exactly the opposite, wants a complete disarmament of the Gaza Strip and the return of all of the hostages. Now, the Prime Minister's office said that there will be no ceasefire or will be no steps to be taken if hostages are not returned. The whole point of the ceasefire and the aid entering the Gaza Strip is to actually bring back some hostages. It's because of the fact that the parties cannot agree on the second phase of the deal that now the government has taken this step. By the way, the estimate in Israel that the aid that entered the Gaza Strip, we're talking about 4,200 trucks every week over the past 6 weeks, will sustain Hamas and the Gazans for at least 4 months, 4 to 6 months. So it's not going to have any immediate effect. But the Prime Minister's office said that consequences or further steps will be taken if the hostages are not returned over the past next weeks.
Balig, you say it's not going to have an immediate effect, pardon me. What is Hamas saying on the other side?
Yes, Hamas is calling this war crime, of course. They're calling it cheap blackmail. That's what they are saying in their statement. And they are ensuring once again that the only way to bring the hostages back is to actually continue for the second phase of the deal and agree to Hamas's terms. That's what they are saying in their statement. And they're calling on the mediators to pressure Israel to continue with the aid flow and continue to the second phase of the deal. The only problem for them is that one of the mediators is the United States that actually coordinated this step with the Israelis and gave the green light of it after all.
Only the early stages of this, Balig, but what does it mean for the ceasefire deal, do we think?
Well, the government will actually vote on the possibility of recruiting or calling up to 400,000 more reservists to the war in the Gaza Strip. That's a step that needs to be taken throughout this day. And I guess this is coming in the right timing from the government's perspective because of the end of the first phase of the deal and the possibility of returning to war because of the gaps between the two sides. Now, I think that it's going to be only a few days before we see further steps being taken by the government. Could it be that the electricity would stop in the Gaza Strip or maybe even the water supply? We're not sure exactly what the steps are going to be. And Israel will proceed further to conquer the Netzarim corridor, for example, as a first step, and they move the Gazans that went back to the north, back to the south of the Strip, and continue with the war. That's the only possibility for now, because I don't see Hamas agreeing to any of Israel's terms, agreeing to lay down their weapons and return all the hostages all at once.
Journalist Balig Sladeen in Tel Aviv, thank you.
Thank you.